Hello, my name is Ethan Hayes. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Miami, Florida, a city of sun-drenched ambitions, glittering skylines, and crushing defeats. I'm the oldest son in a wealthy family where the Hayes name is synonymous with power, luxury condos, and sprawling commercial developments that dominate the coastline. But if you ask anyone in my family, they'll tell you I'm the disappointment, the black sheep of the dynasty, the firstborn who never measured up. Believe me, I've heard it enough times for the words to be carved into my memory like a scar that never fades. I was born in a palatial waterfront estate where every room screamed opulence. My father, Marcus Hayes, is a formidable man with an intense gaze and a voice that commands attention. He's the chairman of the Hayes Development Group, a real estate empire that owns a portfolio of high-rises and shopping centers across Florida. My mother, Catherine, is an elegant woman, always seen in designer outfits with a flawless smile. But I've always seen the disappointment in her eyes when she looks at me. Then there are Leo and Chloe, my younger siblings, the family's golden children, always showered with our parents' pride and trust. Leo, 28, is a brilliant investment banker with a confident smirk and a sharp mind for numbers. Chloe, 26, is a celebrated art gallery curator with connections to major international artists. And me? I'm Ethan, the one who graduated from a top business school but has never built anything of value. From a young age, I felt the immense pressure of expectation. As the eldest, I was supposed to inherit my father's empire, to become an even greater version of him. During tense family dinners, my father would often tell me, "Ethan, you are the future of the Hayes family. Don't let me down." But every time I heard those words, my chest tightened. I didn't want to be a carbon copy of my father. I wanted to build something of my own, something unique that people would remember as Ethan Hayes' creation, not just as the work of Marcus Hayes' son. I tried. I really did. In college, I was a top student, always at the head of my class. I dreamed of launching my own company, separate from the Hayes name. After graduation, I threw myself into startups with all the fiery passion of youth. First was a small coffee house in a trendy Miami neighborhood, with the idea of blending an artistic space with live jazz. I spent months curating the menu, selecting furniture, and even painting the murals myself. But the shop folded after just 6 months due to a lack of business. Next, I ventured into a tech app, a platform designed to connect local boat owners with tourists for private charters. I poured thousands into its development, only to find the market wasn't interested in my idea. Then came a high-end menswear boutique where I hoped to feature emerging designers. But once again, I failed. The customers never came, and I lost almost all of my savings. With every failure, I endured my family's ridicule. My father never said it directly, but his eyes. Those cold, disappointed eyes spoke volumes. My mother was softer, but her suggestions like, "Ethan, why don't you just take a position at your father's company? It would be so much easier," made me feel like a child who couldn't make it on his own. Leo and Chloe were even worse. At family gatherings, Leo would quip, "So, Ethan, what's the next grand venture? A food truck, maybe?" Sierra would giggle and add, "Or maybe a production company. I bet it'll be bankrupt in 3 months." They said it like they were joking, but I knew they genuinely saw me as a failure. I don't entirely blame them. I see why they think that way. While Leo and Chloe were constantly succeeding, Leo with his multi-million-dollar deals, Chloe with her gallery praised in art magazines. I was just the clumsy older brother whose grand ambitions always crashed and burned. But that didn't make their words hurt any less. Every jab, every dismissive glance felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Some nights, I'd lie awake in my small rented apartment on the city's edge, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was as useless as they all thought. Was I destined to be nothing more than a footnote in their success stories? But deep down, I still believed I could create something meaningful. I refused to be just another executive in my father's company, living in his shadow. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, to prove I wasn't the failure they all thought I was. I wanted them to look at me one day and admit they were wrong. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stubbornness, but it was the only thing that kept me going when everything else was falling apart. My apartment is a humble place, a world away from the luxury of the family mansion. It has one small bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a worn-out sofa I bought at a thrift store. But it's my sanctuary, the one place I can be myself without being compared to Leo or Chloe. I often sit by the window looking out at the glittering Miami skyline, dreaming of the day I'll build something that makes this city notice me. But every time I start a new project, the fear of failure returns, whispering in my ear, "You'll fail again, Ethan. You're not good enough." I've considered giving up. I truly have. Once, after my tech app went under, I sat in my small office staring at the red numbers on my screen, thinking maybe my parents were right. Maybe I should abandon my dreams, accept a job at my father's firm, and settle for a safe, predictable life. But every time that thought surfaced, a part of me screamed in defiance. I refused to live a life I didn't believe in. I wanted to succeed on my own terms, no matter how difficult the journey. My family wasn't always so cold. There were moments when I was younger that I felt their love. I remember afternoons when my father would take me to Marlon's games, just the two of us, and tell me stories about how he started the Hayes Development Group from nothing. My mother used to sit with me and read adventure stories, telling me I could be anything I wanted to be. But as I got older and my failures mounted, that warmth disappeared, replaced by crushing expectations and sharp criticism. Miami, for all its beauty, is a tough place to grow up. This city is filled with dreamers, but it's also littered with their broken dreams. I've seen people arrive here hoping for a new life, only to leave with nothing. I don't want to become one of them, but with every failure, I felt myself getting closer to that fate. Then came the day a call from Ryan changed everything. Ryan was a guy I'd met after college. We weren't close friends, mostly just acquaintances who talked about business ideas. Ryan called one late afternoon while I was sitting on my worn-out sofa, staring at an overdue power bill. His voice on the phone was electric with excitement, as if he'd just won the lottery. "Ethan, I've got something for you," he said, his words fast and urgent. "A real game changer. You want to hear it?" I sighed, answering wearily. "Ryan, if this is another one of your crazy schemes like that floating tiki bar idea, I'm not interested." I was all too familiar with Ryan's grand plans, which usually ended with him getting a nice commission while I lost money. No, this is different," Ryan laughed. "I'm talking about real estate. An old gas station on the outskirts near US 1. It's a steal, only $20,000. Can you believe it? An absolute bargain." I sat up, not exactly thrilled but curious. A gas station in the middle of nowhere? Ryan, who buys an abandoned gas station in a spot even the alligators ignore? "That's the beauty of it, Ethan," Ryan said, his voice as smooth as a seasoned salesman's. "The state is planning to expand the highway right through there. I got a tip from an inside source. A major development firm is sniffing around the area. They're planning to build a resort, maybe even an outlet mall. That gas station will be prime real estate. You buy it now, clean it up a little, and you can flip it for 10 times the price, or run it yourself and make a fortune." I was quiet for a moment, trying to process it. Ryan always made everything sound like a once-in-a-lifetime deal, but I knew he wasn't the most trustworthy guy. Ryan was a broker, but not the honest kind. He was tall, with slicked-back hair, a blinding smile, and always wore cheap suits that were tailored to look expensive. "Ryan, I don't have $20,000, I said, my voice tired. "My bank account is overdrawn, and I still owe this month's rent." "Then borrow it," Ryan shot back, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Ethan, you're a Hayes. Your family is loaded. Ask your parents or your siblings. This is your chance to prove you're not." "Well, you know what they say about you." I felt my face flush with anger. Ryan knew all about my family's ridicule, and he wasn't afraid to use it to manipulate me. "Don't bring my family into this," I snapped. "I'm not asking them for a dime. You know what they think of me." All right, Ryan said soothingly, but I could imagine his smirk. "But listen, Ethan, I'm offering this to you. I could sell this to anyone, but I want you to have this shot. 20 grand is a bargain." I negotiated the owner down to that price. "They need to sell fast, and I'm holding it for you. But you have to decide quickly, or it's gone." I closed my eyes trying to think. An abandoned gas station sounded like a terrible idea, but Ryan's talk of a new highway and development projects made me hesitate. I had failed so many times, and the idea of a real chance to turn things around to prove I wasn't a loser made my heart race. But $20,000? It was a fortune to me. "Let me think about it," I said. No time, Ethan, Ryan replied, his voice becoming more urgent. I'm serious. There's another buyer interested. I'm only giving you first dibs because we're friends. You've got 48 hours. Call me back when you're ready, okay? The call ended, and I just sat there, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call back and say no, but another part, the part that was desperate to prove itself, couldn't stop thinking about the possibility. A gas station, an opportunity, a chance to finally stand tall in front of my family and say, I did it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced around my apartment, my mind racing with numbers and what-ifs. I didn't have $20,000, but I could borrow it. I had a few wealthy friends who could lend me the money without a second thought. But what gave me the most pause wasn't the money. It was Ryan. I knew he was a smooth talker, and I couldn't fully trust his words. The next morning, I decided to see the gas station for myself. Ryan met me at a small cafe before we drove to the site. When I arrived, he was already there, dressed in a gray suit, sipping an espresso and scrolling on his phone. Ethan, you made it, he grinned, standing up to clap me on the shoulder. I knew you wouldn't let this slip by. On the drive out to the gas station, Ryan was relentless. He talked nonstop about the new highway, the investors pouring money into the area, and how this gas station was a diamond in the rough that I could polish into a gold mine. But when we got there, my heart sank. The gas station was on a dusty stretch of road far from the glamour of Miami. It was a ruin. The pumps were rusted, the windows of the convenience store were shattered, and the roof looked like it would collapse in a strong breeze. Weeds grew everywhere, and an old sign that read, "The Sunken Anchor," hung crookedly, its paint almost completely faded. This wasn't a diamond in the rough. It was a pile of junk. Ryan, are you serious? I turned to him, trying to keep my voice even. This is worth $20,000? Ryan laughed, but I saw his eyes shift away. Ethan, you have to see the big picture. Don't you see the potential? When that highway comes through, this place will be the center of everything. You just need to invest a little to fix it up and you'll be set for life. Ryan, be straight with me, I pressed. Is this really a steal, or are you just trying to make a quick commission? He clutched his chest, feigning hurt. Ethan, you think I'm that kind of person? I'm your friend. I'm doing this for you. $20,000 is the price I got them down to from 30. The owner needs to sell fast, and I fought to get you this price. I wanted to believe him, but something felt wrong. The way he talked too fast, the way he avoided eye contact. It all made me uneasy. But then I thought of my family, their mocking laughter, my father's disappointed stare. I thought of all my past failures, and this opportunity, as crazy as it seemed, might be the one gamble that could finally pay off and let me prove myself. It took me 2 days to pull the money together. I borrowed from an old friend, promising a quick repayment. I also took out a high-interest loan against my car. Finally, I had the $20,000. I called Ryan and told him I was in. Awesome, he cheered over the phone. You won't regret this, Ethan. This is your turning point. The sale was rushed. Ryan took me to a lawyer's office where the lawyer seemed distracted and barely asked any questions. I signed the papers, handed over the cash, and got the keys to the gas station. As I held them, I felt a strange mix of excitement and terror. This was the first thing I had ever owned outright. But the joy was short-lived. When I told my family about it during a rare family dinner I was forced to attend, their reactions were exactly what I'd braced for. My father let out a harsh, mocking laugh. An abandoned gas station? Ethan, are you serious? What did you waste your money on this time? My mother tried to be gentler, but her voice was laced with disappointment. Ethan, you should be working for your father. Why do you keep chasing these foolish ideas? Leo, as always, saw his opening. I bet that gas station becomes the graveyard of your career, Ethan. You should name it Ethan's Folly. Chloe giggled and chimed in. I'll design a sign for you, free of charge. I sat there, gripping my fork so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to hold back my anger. I wanted to scream, to tell them I would prove them all wrong. But I stayed quiet, swallowed my rage, and promised myself I would succeed. A few days later, I drove out to the gas station with a toolbox and a sliver of hope. As I stepped into the convenience store, the smell of dust and mildew filled the air. I looked at the empty shelves and the cracks in the walls, and a cold wave of doubt washed over me. I paid $20,000 for this? I started to wonder if Ryan had been honest about its value. Weeks later, I found out the devastating truth. A friend in the real estate business looked up the property records for me. The gas station had been listed for only $3,000. I froze. $3,000. Before Ryan helped me, before he negotiated the price down, before he watched me sign the papers with that fake smile. The whole thing was a lie. Ryan had marked up the price by more than 6 times, pocketing the difference and exploiting my desperation. I felt utterly betrayed. The person I thought was giving me a hand up was just a con artist. I stood in the middle of the Sunken Anchor's convenience store, clutching my phone. I dialed Ryan's number. It rang and went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, each unanswered ring feeling like a new stab wound to my pride. Ryan never picked up. He had vanished like a ghost in the Florida humidity, leaving me with this wreck and a heart full of shame. I collapsed into an old chair in the store, my mind reeling. The smell of dust and old gasoline filled my lungs, a constant reminder that I was stuck with this place. A pile of junk I had paid a fortune for. I wondered how I could have been so foolish to trust Ryan. He had targeted my weakest point, my desperate need to prove myself and my fear of my family's judgment. He knew how badly I wanted a win, and he used it against me. I thought of all the times he had laughed, clapped me on the shoulder, and called me his friend. It was all an act. I had let him play me like a fool, and now I was paying the price. I looked out the broken window, considering giving up. I could sell this place for whatever I could get, go back to Miami, and beg my father for a job. At least I wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. But then I pictured my father's gaze, Leo's mocking smile, Chloe's giggles. If I gave up now, they would have every reason to laugh at me for the rest of my life. I would have no dignity left. I stood up, wiped the sweat from my brow, and looked around at the disaster I owned. Even if Ryan had scammed me, even if I had made a colossal mistake, I knew I couldn't quit. The Sunken Anchor was my last chance, and I had to see it through to the end. The days that followed were a blur of grueling, backbreaking work. I started by cleaning out the convenience store, where dust and cobwebs had taken over every surface. The empty shelves, caked in grime, looked like artifacts from a forgotten time. I bought an old broom, a bucket, and some cheap cleaning supplies. I scrubbed the floors, wiped down the shattered windows, and tried to patch the leaking roof with some scrap metal. Every sweep of the broom, every drop of sweat that hit the floor, felt like a small victory against the doubt that was eating away at me. The Sunken Anchor, true to its name, felt isolated in the Florida scrubland. US 1, which ran past it, was mostly empty, with only an occasional truck rumbling by, kicking up a cloud of dust. I began to wonder if Ryan had lied about the new highway too. The thought that I'd been tricked not just about the price but about the land's entire potential sent a chill down my spine. But every time doubt crept in, I told myself, "You've come this far, Ethan. You can't turn back now." I focused on fixing one thing at a time. The gas pumps were completely shot, their pipes rusted through. I couldn't afford to replace them, so I bought used parts from a nearby scrapyard and taught myself how to repair them by watching online tutorials. I'd never been a mechanic, but I was a fast learner. Some days I worked from sunrise to midnight, my hands and arms covered in grease and scratches. But I kept going. Every time I fixed something, a pump sputtering back to life, a light flickering on in the store. I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my self-respect. Then, one afternoon, while I was struggling with a leaky pipe under the store's floor, everything changed. That pipe had been tormenting me for a week. Water kept seeping out, flooding a corner of the floor, and I couldn't afford a plumber. I decided to fix it myself, even though I knew nothing about plumbing. Armed with a wrench and a small shovel, I started breaking up the floor. The old cracked concrete was tough, and I had to put all my weight into every strike. Sweat poured down my face and dust covered my clothes, but I didn't stop. I had to fix that pipe, or the whole store would become a swamp. After hours of digging, I heard a strange sound. Not the crack of concrete, but a dull thud, like I had hit something solid. I stopped, panting, and looked down. Beneath the broken concrete, I saw a wooden panel, old and dark, that didn't match the rest of the floor. It looked like a small trapdoor set into the foundation. My heart started to pound. What was this? A trapdoor? A hidden storage space? Or just a forgotten piece of wood? I knelt, brushing away the dust and debris. The wood was held in place by rusted nails, which were loose from years of neglect. I used my wrench to pry them out one by one, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I lifted the last piece of wood, I saw a dark void below. A cold, deep passage leading into blackness. A damp breeze carrying the scent of old wood and something like aged wine washed over my face. I switched on my phone's flashlight, its weak beam revealing a rickety wooden staircase that looked like it could collapse at any moment. I stood there, hesitating. Part of me wanted to cover it back up, fix the pipe, and forget I ever saw it. But another part, the curious part, the part that was starving for a lucky break, pushed me to go down. The stairs groaned under my weight, and I held onto the railing to keep my balance. When I reached the bottom, I raised my flashlight, and what I saw made me freeze. The cellar wasn't huge, maybe a couple hundred square feet, but it was filled with wooden crates and old iron shelves lined with hundreds of wine bottles, all covered in dust and cobwebs. Some bottles were lying on their sides on the shelves, while others were packed in large crates, as if someone had carefully stored them and then forgotten all about them. The labels were faded, but I could still make out a few names. The smudged, old-fashioned script hinted at prestigious brands: Chateau Margaux, Dom Perignon, Lafite Rothschild. My heart pounded faster as my flashlight beam swept over the bottles, each one arranged with care like a hidden treasure. This cellar wasn't just for storage. It was a forgotten vault of riches, buried under decades of dust. I moved slowly, afraid that a sudden movement might shatter something priceless. I knelt and picked up a bottle, carefully wiping the dust from its label. In the faint glow of my flashlight, I saw the words, Chateau Margaux, 1921. I wasn't a wine expert, but I knew enough to realize this wasn't just any old wine. I set the bottle down, my hand trembling. What was this? How could a collection of wine like this be hidden under the floor of a derelict gas station in the middle of the Florida wilderness? I swept my flashlight across the cellar again, roughly estimating hundreds of bottles, not even counting the large wooden crates in the corner. Some of the crates had inscriptions carved into them, but I couldn't read them in the dim light. I felt like I had stumbled into a mystery, a story buried long ago. I sat down on the cellar floor, trying to get my thoughts in order. This gas station had been abandoned for decades, long before Ryan tricked me into buying it. Maybe it had been forgotten since the Prohibition era in the 1920s when alcohol was illegal. I had read about that time, about bootleggers running secret operations, hiding liquor and wine in underground cellars to avoid the authorities. Could this be one of those stashes? A place where smugglers hid premium wines, only to never return for them? I stood up, determined to investigate more. I pulled out a wooden crate, the wood groaning under the weight. Inside were more bottles, some still sealed with red wax, looking as if they had been bottled yesterday. I picked up another bottle, this time a Dom Perignon labeled 1928. I had heard my father talk about auctions in Miami where collectors paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single rare bottle. If every bottle in this cellar was worth that much, the entire collection could be worth tens of millions. But as soon as that thought appeared, a wave of doubt pulled me back to reality. I was Ethan Hayes, the failure, the one who always tripped when opportunity was within reach. Was this just another mirage? Were these bottles actually valuable, or were they fakes, abandoned because they were worthless? I didn't know enough about wine to tell, and the thought that I might be fooling myself sent a chill through me. But I couldn't ignore the possibility. I climbed back up the stairs to the convenience store and grabbed an old notebook from my toolbox. I started taking notes, counting the bottles in the crates and writing down the labels I could read. My hand shook as I wrote, not from the cold, but from a mix of excitement and fear. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I needed an expert to verify this. That night, I took a few bottles back to my apartment, carefully placing them on my kitchen table like they were crown jewels. I opened my laptop and started researching vintage wines, the Prohibition era, and the value of bottles like Chateau Margaux and Dom Pérignon. What I found made me feel like I was dreaming. A Chateau Margaux 1921 had recently sold for 150,000 arsons at an auction in New York. A Dom Pérignon 1928, if it was in good condition, could easily sell for 80,000. And I didn't have just one or two of these. I had hundreds, maybe thousands, in that cellar. If even a fraction of them were real, the collection could be worth tens of millions. I sat there, staring at my computer screen, feeling the world spin. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for my entire life, an unbelievable miracle. But along with the excitement, a new fear emerged. Was I capable of handling this? Or would I mess it up just like I had with everything else? I closed the laptop, stood up, and paced around my small apartment. I needed a plan. I couldn't just show up at an auction with these bottles without knowing if they were authentic. I needed to find an expert, but how could I contact someone without giving away my secret? I had learned my lesson with Ryan. Blind trust could cost me everything. I decided to keep this a secret, at least until I knew what I was dealing with. The next morning, I returned to the sunken anchor with a completely different perspective. The cellar was no longer a damp, dark hole. It was a potential treasure chest, a chance to change my life. I spent the whole day in the cellar, inspecting every bottle and every crate. Some bottles were broken, their contents long gone, but most were intact, their red wax seals still firm. While examining a crate in the corner, I found something else, a small notebook with a rotting leather cover tucked between two crates. I carefully opened it, its yellowed, fragile pages threatening to crumble. Inside were handwritten notes detailing transactions, dates, quantities of bottles, and a list of recipients' names. I realized this gas station must have been a hub for a bootlegging operation long ago. I imagined men in long coats, driving old trucks in the middle of the night, hiding bottles under the floorboards and stashing crates in this cellar. The sunken anchor wasn't just a gas station. It was a piece of history, a relic from a chaotic and mysterious time. I decided to contact a wine expert, but I would do it carefully. I searched online and found an auction house in Miami that specialized in vintage wines. I didn't give any details, only saying that I had a few old bottles and wanted them appraised. The man on the phone, who had a deep, professional voice, agreed to meet me in a few days but asked me to bring a few bottles to his office. I hesitated. Taking the bottles out of the cellar was a risk, but I had no other choice. I needed to know for sure. I selected 3 bottles, a Chateau Margaux 1921, a Dom Pérignon 1928, and another with a handwritten label, and carefully packed them in a small wooden box I found in the cellar. As I left the gas station, I felt like I was carrying a ticking bomb. Every time my car hit a pothole on US 1, I winced, terrified the bottles would break. I drove slowly, my eyes glued to the road, my heart pounding. The meeting with the wine expert took place on a Tuesday morning at an auction house office in downtown Miami. I walked in, clutching the wooden box, feeling like everyone was staring at me. The man I met, Mr. Arthur Vance, was a renowned wine expert with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses. He had a sharp gaze, as if he could size up a person in a single glance. I placed the box on the table, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained that I had found a few old bottles in a property I had recently bought. I didn't mention the sunken anchor or the cellar. I didn't want anyone to know too much, not yet. Mr. Vance opened the box, carefully lifting each bottle and examining the labels and seals under a bright light. His face remained neutral, but I saw his hand tremble slightly as he held the Chateau Margaux 1921. "You say you found these bottles in a property?" he asked, his voice low but with a hint of skepticism. I nodded, trying to look calm, though my heart was beating like a drum. After a long silence, Mr. Vance sat down, took off his glasses and looked at me. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know where you found these bottles, but I can tell you that they are genuine, and they are extremely rare. A Chateau Margaux 1921, if it's in good condition, could easily sell for $150,000 at auction. The Dom Pérignon 1928 is just as impressive, likely worth between $80,000 and $100,000. As for this one with the handwritten label," he paused, looking at it more closely, I would need to do more research, but it could be part of a special batch from the Prohibition era. If you have more bottles like these, you are sitting on a treasure. I felt the blood rush to my head, like the world was tilting. You're saying, how much? I stammered, struggling to process the numbers. These 3 bottles alone could bring in several $100,000, Mr. Vance said, his tone as calm as if he were talking about the weather. But if you have more, a whole collection, the value could be in the millions. How many more bottles do you have? I hesitated. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I had hundreds of bottles, dozens of crates, but the memory of Ryan made me cautious. I'm not sure, I replied, keeping my voice vague. I need to check again. But can you help me appraise and sell them? Mr. Vance smiled for the first time. Of course, Mr. Hayes. But I will need to see the entire collection, and we will need to do this properly. Verify, appraise, and organize an auction. If you agree, I can reach out to some international collectors. They will pay top dollar for bottles like these. I left the office feeling both ecstatic and terrified. Mr. Vance promised to keep the information confidential, but I knew that in a city like Miami, word of a big discovery would eventually get out. I returned to the sunken anchor that afternoon, checked the lock on the cellar, and started making a plan. I needed to secure the wine, hire a security team, and install cameras. But I didn't have the money for any of that yet. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly. I contacted Mr. Vance again, bringing him a few more bottles to verify, and he confirmed that most of them were in excellent condition. He estimated that the entire collection could be worth up to $50 million, maybe even more. The number left me speechless. I, Ethan Hayes, the one my family called the shame of the dynasty, was sitting on a treasure that could change my life forever. I decided to start with a small auction, selling just 10 bottles to test the market and raise some initial capital. Mr. Vance organized the auction at a luxurious Miami hotel, inviting a select group of wealthy collectors from around the world. I stood in the corner of the room in a borrowed suit, feeling out of place among the men and women in designer clothes. When the Chateau Margaux 1921 was put on the block, the starting bid was $100,000. Within 10 minutes, it sold for $180,000. In total, the 10 bottles brought in over $2 million. I could hardly believe my eyes as I looked at the numbers on the contract. With the money from the auction, I began to transform the sunken anchor into something more. First, I paid off all my debts. The loans from friends, the loan on my car, and the pile of bills that had been stacking up. I hired a security team to guard the gas station 247, installed cameras, and put in an alarm system to protect the cellar. I fixed the leaking roof, replaced the rusted gas pumps, and turned the convenience store into a modern space with a high-end wine counter at its center. I selected a few bottles from the cellar and displayed them in sleek glass cases, like a small museum telling the story of the Prohibition era. Each bottle was a piece of history, and I wanted customers to feel that. Over the next 6 months, I worked closely with Mr. Vance, organizing 3 more auctions. In total, I earned over $30 million from the sales, a figure that made me dizzy every time I checked my bank account. With that money, I bought more land around the sunken anchor, based on the information about the new highway that Ryan had mentioned. It turned out that part of his story, at least, wasn't a lie. In early 2023, construction on the highway began, and investors started looking at the area. I started to dream bigger, not just a gas station, but a small resort where travelers could stop, enjoy fine wine, and hear the story of the desert's hidden treasure. But as the sunken anchor began to shine, a new challenge appeared. My family. The news about the wine collection couldn't stay a secret forever, and soon enough they found out. Their reactions were a mix of shock, envy, and a sudden attempt to get involved in my success. I knew they would reach out, but I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, or in a way that left me both heartbroken and furious. My mother called first one evening while I was checking the new gas pumps. Her voice was trembling, a sharp contrast to her usual sarcastic tone. "Ethan, I heard about the wine, about the sunken anchor. Is it true? Did you really find all that?" I stood in the convenience store, gripping the phone, feeling old anger rise up. "Yes, Mom, it's true. I did it." "Ethan, I'm so proud," she said. but I could hear the strain in her voice like she was playing a part she wasn't used to. Your father wants to meet with you. We need to talk about this. A treasure like that. You need support. Hayes Development can help you manage it. We can bring the sunken anchor into the family's portfolio. I let out a dry laugh, feeling a weight on my chest. Mom, now the family wants to help? After you all called this place the graveyard of my career? After you, Dad, Leo, and Chloe mocked me every time I tried to do something? Ethan, don't say that, she replied, her voice rising as if I had hit a nerve. We were just worried about you. Your father thinks this is a chance for the family to work together. You shouldn't be doing this alone. I hung up, not wanting to hear anymore. My mother's words weren't about support, they were about control, about pulling me back under the shadow of the Hayes Development Group. They weren't there when I was scrubbing floors, when I was wrestling with rusted pipes, when I was staying up all night worrying. Now that I had succeeded, they wanted a piece of the pie. I felt hurt, but more than that, I realized I didn't need them anymore. The sunken anchor was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Leo and Chloe reached out soon after, but not to apologize. Leo sent a long text, starting with a fake congratulations. Ethan, who would have thought you'd get so lucky? A multi-million-dollar wine collection. But be careful, managing that kind of money isn't easy. If you need, we can sit down and talk about investments. I read the message, my face flushing with anger. Lucky? He thought this was all luck? I didn't reply. I just deleted the message. Chloe called, her voice as sweet as honey. Ethan, I hear the sunken anchor is a big deal now. I could help you redesign the store, make it more upscale. I know some great contractors, and I'd do it at a discount for you. I declined immediately, my tone cold. I didn't need their help, not when it came with such obvious strings attached. The final confrontation was with my father. He summoned me to his office at the Hayes Development headquarters, a place I had avoided for years. When I walked in, he was sitting behind his massive desk, his gaze no longer cold, but filled with curiosity and a reluctant respect. Ethan, he said, his voice low. I was wrong to doubt you. This wine collection, it's a miracle. But you need to understand, something this big is beyond your abilities. Let Hayes Development help you manage it. We have the resources, the experience. I looked him straight in the eye, for the first time in my life not feeling small. Thank you, Dad, but I can handle it. The sunken anchor is mine, and I'm keeping it that way. He fell silent, just nodding, but I knew he wasn't happy. To him, everything had to belong to the family, to the Hayes name. But this time, I wasn't the boy who was desperate for his approval. I was Ethan Hayes, the one who turned an abandoned gas station into a miracle, and I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me. In the months that followed, I poured my entire being into expanding the sunken anchor. With over $30 million from the wine auctions, I had the capital to start, but I knew I needed a strategic partner to make my dream a reality. I briefly considered working with the Hayes Development Group, my father's company, but I quickly dismissed the thought. My father didn't want a partnership. He wanted control. He wanted to absorb the sunken anchor into the family empire, where I would once again be just a shadow under the Hayes name. I couldn't let that happen. After years of being mocked and doubted, I wanted to stand on my own, to prove that I could succeed without my family's help. Instead, I reached out to Coastal Equities, a major real estate and entertainment company and a direct competitor of the Hayes Development Group. Coastal Equities was known for its bold projects in Miami, from luxury resorts to modern casinos. I met their CEO, Miss C's. Isabella Rossi, in mid-2020 at an upscale restaurant in downtown Miami. Ms. Rossi was a sharp woman with keen eyes and a smile that was both friendly and calculating. I pitched my idea. An entertainment complex at the Sunken Anchor, featuring a fine dining restaurant specializing in wine, a boutique desert-themed hotel, and a small casino inspired by the Prohibition era, all drawing from the story of my wine discovery. Ethan, I have to say, I'm impressed, Ms. Rossi said, sipping her wine. Your story, from an abandoned gas station to a multi-million-dollar treasure, is something customers will love. And the Sunken Anchor's location on the new highway is a golden opportunity. We want to partner with you. But are you sure you want to go this route? I hear your father wasn't pleased when you turned down the Hayes Development Group. I smiled, trying to hide a flicker of tension. Ms. Rossi, I respect my father, but the sunken anchor is mine. I want to build it my way. Ms. Rossi nodded, her eyes showing approval. I understand. We'll provide support with funding, design, and operations, but you will be the one leading. This is your project, Ethan. The deal was signed. Coastal Equities invested $20 million, which I combined with $10 million of my own, to begin construction on the Sunken Anchor Entertainment Complex. Throughout the construction, I worked 16-hour days, never feeling tired. Every brick that was laid, every light that was installed, was a step toward proving that I was more than the failure of the Hayes family. I was building something of my own, a legacy that no one could take away. By June 2024, the Sunken Anchor Entertainment Complex officially opened. The ceremony was a dazzling event, with hundreds of guests, from journalists to wine collectors and tourists. The restaurant, named Vintage Haven, served gourmet dishes paired with modern wines, but its centerpiece was a display counter showcasing a few bottles from my treasure, housed in glass cases like precious jewels. The boutique hotel, with 50 rooms, had a modern desert aesthetic, with each room decorated with details that evoked the Prohibition era. The Speakeasy Star Casino was the highlight, with poker tables and slot machines designed to look like secret speakeasies, attracting both tourists and locals. The Sunken Anchor quickly became a renowned destination in Florida. Articles hailed it as the new gem of the coast, and tourists flocked to take photos with the Sunken Anchor sign, hear the story of the wine discovery, and experience the unique atmosphere I had created. I hired a professional team, from chefs to casino managers, and for the first time, I felt not just like an entrepreneur, but like a leader. My life had turned a new, brighter page. I no longer lived in the cramped apartment on the outskirts of Miami. I bought a spacious house in a quiet suburban area with a view of the coast, where I could sit on the porch each evening and watch the lights of the Sunken Anchor twinkle in the distance. I no longer woke up with the fear of failure, haunted by my father's disappointed gaze or Leo and Chloe's mockery. I had found peace within myself, not because of the money or fame, but because I had proven my worth, not to my family, but to myself. The Sunken Anchor was more than an entertainment complex. It was a testament to perseverance, faith, and the ability to see value where others see none. I still kept in touch with my family, but only minimally. I forgave them, but I didn't forget the scars they had left. My father remained displeased that I had partnered with Coastal Equities, but he could do nothing but watch my success from afar. And I, Ethan Hayes, was no longer the failure of the family. I was the one who turned an abandoned gas station into an icon, and I would continue to build my dream, brick by brick. That's the story of my life, from being called the shame of the Hayes dynasty, a failure with shattered dreams, to the man who built the Sunken Anchor, a dazzling entertainment complex on the Florida coast, a symbol of perseverance and belief in oneself. And if you ask me for advice, I would say this: never let doubt or ridicule define you. The greatest opportunities can come from the most unexpected places, like an abandoned gas station or a dusty cellar. Believe in yourself, seize those chances, and don't be afraid of failure, because sometimes those failures lead you to the treasure of your life. Keep pushing forward, and I believe you will succeed on the path you have chosen.